Houston Texans, Seattle Seahawks, everything you need to know for your fantasy teams and player projections in 15 minutes. If you've never been here before, welcome. My name is Max. I make these for every primetime game as well as every game on Sunday, giving you a unique edge, looking at run scheme metrics, coverage data, and overall trends that people don't talk about because it relates to the scheme behind the game instead of just the stats you see on the screen. Without further ado, let's get into this breakdown. As always, in the description is a link to my socials, my Twitter, my Instagram, and TikTok. Make sure you're locked in on there. That's where all my picks will be for these games. Houston versus Seattle. 3.5-point favorites are the Seattle Seahawks at home with a total of 41.5. I honestly think that number is a little bit high. I think there's going to be a lower scoring game, but we'll talk about which side, the total at the end. Let's talk Texans defense first. The bottom line here with all of the data that I've seen is that the Texans defense is almost going to force Sam Darnold into what he usually does, and he's going to challenge the Texans secondary. It's essentially made the best man win. JSN, Derek Stingley, as well as the depth on either side. It's who is the better player, who is going to win one-on-one. That is how this game is going to be decided on that side of the ball. The only potential issues here, if you're the Seahawks offense going against this Texans defense, is the fact that they're really stout against the run, right? They're top 10 defensively in terms of yards per game, yards per carry, and there are no overall data outliers. It's very tough to predict anything against this Texans defense, but there's a couple notes that we can make. When you look at the running back position, it is important to note that Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker, you can see the snap counts there. They're kind of going back to back, right? Zach Charbonnet outsnapped him the past 2 weeks. Then the week before that, Kenneth Walker outsnapped him. The running back room in Seattle is a nightmare to try and predict, but it is important to note that the Texans are playing the sixth most zone in the NFL. So they're going to sit back in their cover 3, sometimes match. They're going to sit back and cover 4, sometimes match. So they trust their secondary. They trust the DBs that they have to match receivers one-on-one down the field, to match tight ends, and it works. Like, they're really good in the secondary. Will Anderson Jr., Daniil Hunter, they're going to get after the quarterback. This is a really, really good defense, which scares me looking at things. But I look at the target rates for the Texans, and I feel a little bit more confident in JSN, to be honest with you, but in a couple players. 9th highest out-wide target rate for this Texans defense, and the 9th highest slot target rate. The bottom line is, when teams throw against them, which is a lot because they're very good against the run, it's most likely to wideouts, but it's a lot of between the numbers or between the hashes. The middle of the field is where teams will try to attack the Houston Texans. And I say try because it's a difficult task to do so. You can go look at some of these game logs against the Houston Texans. These guys are no joke, right? You look at even some of the best receivers, the best quarterbacks who have gone against these guys, like Baker, 215. The highest passing yard total for any quarterback against this defense this year is 245 for Matt Stafford in week 1. Trevor Lawrence, 222. Like, there's a certain ceiling that players reach when they play the Houston Texans. Even looking at wide receivers, like, the only huge performance from any receiver this year, again, was week 1, Puka Nacua. You've stopped guys like Mike Evans, Emeka Egbuka. You've stopped guys like Brian Thomas Jr., obviously Calvin Ridley. Nothing super crazy. And these Ravens receivers with Cooper Rush at quarterback are not going to have crazy games, but there's a certain ceiling you reach. You look at some of the running back performances. No running back has eclipsed 71 yards. No running back has barely eclipsed 70, and eclipsing 70 took 17 carries. Like, there's certain ceilings that you reach against the Houston Texans. But when Sam Darnold sees higher zone percentage teams, sees teams that allow a good amount of targets to the receiver position, regardless of where they're aligned, Jackson Smith-Njigba sees a huge uptick in target rate, in usage, and overall production. Same with both running backs. Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker are very similar in the sense that they're more heavily used in the pass game against zone. But that's pretty much it, guys. Cooper Kupp has the second most targets against zone, but a lower target rate, meaning he's targeted less frequently against zone than he is against man. So it's kind of hard to predict and believe that he can do something crazy, at least with past production. Now, when Darnold throws the football, he throws it out wide at the highest rate, which mainly is JSN, but there's still guys like occasionally Cooper Kupp, occasionally Jake Bobo, Torrey Orton Jr. Like, there's still guys like that. However, he also throws it to the inline tight end spot at the highest rate as well. Now, A.J. Barner's been pretty good. Elijah Arroyo has stepped up and made some plays as well. But again, with the Texans, they have allowed very, very minimal production to the tight end position. Like, you look at some of these games, guys, 1 touchdown all year to Davis Allen, a 13-yard catch in week 1. No tight end has eclipsed 61 yards, and it was Brenton Strange. And again, these tight ends aren't world beater tight ends. Like Mark Andrews, good player, but Cooper Rush was playing quarterback. Chigo, Conquo, and Gunnar Helm. Like these guys are not world beater tight ends, but it is worth noting that the Texans have been able to slam the door on some of these tight ends. Darnold is essentially a two-trick pony in the offense with Kubiak. He loves throwing to JSN. He loves taking shots down the field. And when he doesn't have to, he looks at the tight end position. Even these running backs, which we'll talk game logs here, aren't heavily involved in the pass game. Like right now, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, both projected, I believe, at plus money for both of them. Obviously not financial or professional advice. 1.5 reception, then 6.5 and 7.5 receiving yards. Like you think that's not a lot until you go look at some of these game logs. Like Kenneth Walker's had one game where he's had more than 2 catches, despite being on the field for a lot of these third downs, right? He had 1, 2, 3 games where he's had more than 7 receiving yards. He's had 2 games where he's had more than 2 targets, guys. There's nothing here that makes me believe that Kenneth Walker can have a significant impact in the pass game. And very similarly with Zach Charbonnet, the last couple weeks have been better for Charbonnet, and he's played more in the last couple weeks. But again, 2 games with more than 2 targets, 1 game with more than 1 catch. I can't confidently lean into either of these guys, but JSN I do really like. Now, he's projected 7 catches at plus money as well as 86 receiving yards, which he's hit in all but 1 game. And even that Arizona game, he almost did it. You just look at some of these average numbers in terms of his receptions. You look at some of the targets, like very few games will he get less than 6 targets. In 1, 2, 3, 4 games, he's had at least 9 targets. And these are against decent secondaries, right? Like Pittsburgh's played okay this year. San Francisco's been okay this year. Jacksonville's been solid this year. These are against secondaries that aren't necessarily a slouch. I don't think they're as good as Houston's, but can allow similar production to a receiver like JSN. So when I go look at this 85.5 number for JSN, I think it's a little bit too low. I do like that. But in terms of the running back production, Sam Darnold production, like I talked about a couple minutes ago, there are certain ceilings that the Texans cap production at for quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends, and even running backs. And I can't feel confident in anything outside of the number 1 wide receiver, which again, I think is going to have a good game against this Houston Texans defense. I don't think it's a crazy game, but reminds me a lot of the spot with Puka where you know what's coming, you know what you have to stop. The volume will almost be so much that you can't stop it. Looking at the Seahawks defense, the bottom line here is the Texans need some special performances from their running backs. Like the Seattle Seahawks, we've talked about every time we break down a game. They give up so many targets and receptions to the running back position. It's almost laughable. Most running back receptions, second most running back receiving yards. What's also interesting is they're allowing 6+ tight end receptions per game. Again, this is another really good run defense, second fewest yards per carry allowed, but there's enough data here with the running back position, the tight end position, for us to lean into something pretty solid, but also really fun at the very end. Looking at the coverage data, they're also very zone heavy. Third most zone in the NFL, but they do a lot of middle field open. So a lot of quarters, a lot of cover 2. The Seahawks are going to not dare you to run the football, but show safety looks where you may think it's better to run the football. Now, it's important to note with the Texans offense, they've been way better the past couple weeks, like way better, but they're a little more banged up than you would think. When you look at the injury report, Christian Kirk is out for this game, and we'll talk about him against zone coverage. That's a big gap you have to fill in your pass game against zone coverage because he had 10 targets in the smaller sample size just against zone alone with CJ Stroud. They were establishing a rapport, and now he's out. While we are on the injury report looking at the Seattle Seahawks, these guys you assume all playing, right? You don't fully know until the game starts. Love, Witherspoon, questionable. Assuming they play, the Seahawks secondary is as healthy as it's been really all year long. So I like the Seahawks secondary against these wide receivers, guys like Nico Collins, guys like Jaden Higgins. But the tight end and running back position, again, provide some really unique value for the Houston Texans to take advantage. And this dink and dunk pass game, even though offenses haven't had some crazy games against the Seattle Seahawks, works. It does. In terms of target rate, they are below average, the Seahawks, everywhere else, in line, out wide, in the slot, but giving up the highest target rate to running backs in the NFL. When CJ Stroud gets zone, he throws to Woody Marks much more often than he would against man coverage, right? He has an enormous, enormous target rate increase versus zone. The really fun one, though, is right here. Brendan Bates. You go look at some of these snap counts for the Houston Texans, and it's nothing super crazy. But Brendan Bates played 13 snaps last week. He played 6 snaps in week 4. This is a guy who's been elevated, who's been playing a little bit more than usual and has a solid matchup this week where Christian Kirk is out. They may lean a little bit more 12 personnel. I like Brendan Bates, probably not for what you think, but I'll talk about him at the end, to step up and have a little bit more of a role in the offense today. Christian Kirk had 10 targets, like I talked about, in a smaller sample size against zone, but he's not playing. Somebody has to step up. Somebody has to step up. When you look at CJ Stroud's target rate, he's the 5th highest inline target rate in the NFL, like we talked about. Brendan Bates, maybe Dalton Schultz. When you look at Schultz's game log, it's kind of like I talked about what the Texans do to the opposing offenses. He has a very clear ceiling here, right? But with the addition of Christian Kirk, the subtraction of Christian Kirk this game, you don't know, right? He may be out there a little bit more. He may take some slot reps where guys like, Harrison Bryant, Brendan Bates take the true traditional inline reps. You don't fully know, but I do know that CJ Stroud likes to get the ball to the inline spot. And there's a great matchup this game against a Seahawks defense that isn't great against the tight end or running back position. That's the reality of it. And I look at Dalton Schultz, and there are some more encouraging signs here of what he can do compared to what he's done in the past. Like you look at the reception numbers, 5+ receptions in 3 straight games. And right now his projection for receptions is 4.5 at plus money. So if you want to take a little risk there, I don't mind it. Looking at the target rate and route distribution for the running backs, though, the Bear numbers are a little bit more difficult to understand because Woody Marks has more routes, more yards per out run, but Nick Chubb has more targets per out run. The most important thing here is Woody Marks is dominating the third down routes and snaps. That's the most important thing because in a game where you go against a run defense that is allowing the second fewest yards per carry, I don't know if the Texans will be able to have a lot of success on the ground. What's most important is who's on the field when you're throwing the football. And likely, based on past production, that's going to be Woody Marks. You look at the snap counts for the Houston Texans in the past as well. Dameon Pierce playing more last week was, I guess, a little bit more concerning. But who had the most snaps out of any running back pre-bye? Even though he didn't have a great game, it was Woody Marks. Like, he is still, to me, the number one in this backfield. Obviously, Nick Chubb is going to be out there early downs. Obviously, Nick Chubb is probably going to get the goal line work. So I don't love Woody Marks to get in the end zone. But what I do like is this, 14.5 receiving yards or 2.5 receptions at plus money. Because again, the Seahawks are giving up so many receiving yards, so many receptions to opposing running backs. The matchup does not get better for Woody Marks. And when you scroll down a little bit more, this is what I want to talk about. Brendan Bates, if you are looking for a long shot, I'm telling you guys, Brendan Bates, and we'll talk about who I think is going to win this game in a minute here. But Brendan Bates, I'm not saying I feel confident in this, but the data says Stroud likes to throw to the tight end spot. It's zone coverage, so tight ends are going to be increased, and Brendan Bates has 2 targets, 2 receptions in the small sample size against zone. If they get down there, I'm just saying Brendan Bates to get in the end zone, to me, is not a horrible, tiny little sprinkle. Then Dalton Schultz, 35.5 receiving yards, 4.5 receptions. I'd probably prefer the receptions over the yards, but I like a 25-plus yard leg or a 3 to 4 yard catch leg across games. The bottom line here, though, is, again, I talked about this number at the top. I think it is a little bit high. I don't know if I can confidently do it because I think the Seahawks offense is just playing that well. But I do think Seattle wins this game by more than a field goal. I don't think Houston has enough offensively to go against this really good defense on the road on primetime. Like, I think this is a tough spot for them. But there is another Monday Night Football breakdown for you guys in the description here. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you're new. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.